I think at a very fundamental level, a life worth living or a good life is one where you have a sense of well-being and a sense of purpose, right? And so the circumstances can be really variable, and I think that having sort of the resilience and the ability to find joy in the circumstances that life has given someone is the basis of a good life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Dawn Sumner. Dawn is a geobiologist who studies how Earth and life have co-evolved over billions of years. She has been a professor in Earth and Planetary Sciences at the University of California, Davis for 28 years. She has been an author on more than 130 publications, and Dawn has been honored for her scientific research by several societies, including the American Association for the Advancement of Science. In addition to her science, Dawn prioritizes the human side of life in her interactions with others. She is dedicated to helping people of all backgrounds prepare for and succeed in scientific careers. Specifically, she makes time to listen to the problems individuals are facing and helps them find productive paths forward, whether the challenges originate from cultural barriers, harassment, mental health issues, and other circumstances, or their interactions. For her own well-being, Dawn participates in capoeira. This beautiful Afro-Brazilian art form provides intense physical interactions, improvisational music, and a strong community grounded in centuries of tradition. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Broderick.
Dawn is my capoeira friend, sister. We've known each other a while now, and after capoeira events, we tend to get into these deep philosophical conversations about life and its meaning. And I was like, Dawn, let's get on the podcast. Why not get on the podcast and share with the audience, share with the world some of our, I guess, intense, in a positive way, conversations centered around how to make the world a better place. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here and talk in sort of a little bit more formal way.
Yeah, so, we won't be dropping too many F-bombs and all that kind of stuff. No, I'm joking.
Well, I wasn't planning to, so.
So it is great to have you here. I've been, with this podcast, I've interviewed all types of people. I'm always reaching out to folks to interview, and, and recently I've been thinking about all these great, wonderful people I have in my life that I have these wonderful conversations with, and you are one of those. And why not have them on the podcast and let's highlight these various viewpoints from ordinary folks like ourselves. And you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be. Well, you're famous. You're more famous than I am.
Well, it depends on the community, right?
Yeah.
Fame is all relative.
Yeah, but I'm excited to have this conversation with you. As you can see, audience, we laugh a lot, and that's capoeira. At least there's an aspect of capoeira. It's very playful, and I'll try not to joke too much and.
I don't know. I think joking is part of living the good life, so I think it's appropriate.
Right. I know. Well, I know I just read that introduction, and but I still like guests to introduce themselves because it's a little different than the well-curated bio.
Yeah, the bios cover kind of a long span of life, and we're ideally sort of living in the moment and dealing with things right now. And so I would say that right now, like a lot of people, I'm struggling with how to deal with the changes in society and our environment around us, trying to sort out how to move forward, build on good things, help people, basically thinking a lot about the future. And I've been a professor at UC Davis for 28 years, and I'm thinking about transitioning into an early retirement in a couple of years, because that'll have been half my life, and I want to explore what else I can do and look at some new things. And so I feel like I'm in a place right now, transition. I just spent 3 weeks in Brazil, and I'm coming back to my normal life with some new insights, and I'm on a short time frame and a longer time frame. I'm looking at what do I want to do next.
That's amazing. I envy you a little bit, just a little bit. Being in university for 28 years, originally that's what I wanted to do, is teach at the university level, and I mean I just did part-time at Laney College for and teaching biology, human biology, but I had a change of heart back then and found a different path that led me to doing things such as this podcast. So it's wonderful to hear. I admire and respect people who are educators and dedicated to teaching young people, hopefully critical thinking skills.
Yes.
Hopefully. I must say this. I must ask this. I don't want to spend too much time on this podcast, but 28 years of academia, and there's all types of criticism of academia, especially these days, and with the culture war stuff happening. I just want to ask you to say a little bit about your experience in teaching over the last 28 years. We don't have to go too much detail, and say a little bit about this commentary about being a professor in a university setting, and the things that are happening with the culture war stuff. Right. I'll just say.
Right. It's university settings, like a lot of them are different. And one of the reasons I've been at UC Davis for so long is that I feel like it's a university that has a lot of the sort of institutional aspects that universities do with the structure, accreditation, but it also has more flexibility in terms of openness to a broader range of people than a lot of universities. And so one of the things about institutions, and especially I went to sort of elite technical schools as a student, and to succeed in them, students had to have like specific cultural skills. You had to have this ability to listen to lectures, learn orally, connect that to study skills that most of us learn from our parents, right? And so one of the things that I really learned at UC Davis, we have a lot of students from local communities, including immigrants, children from immigrants whose parents maybe didn't even finish junior high school. And they have all of the intellectual abilities to succeed, but they don't have the cultural tools to understand how to navigate a university system. And so one of the things that I really like about UC Davis is that there's been a lot of emphasis on helping very smart people gain the skills to succeed at a university. And what that does is it threatens the traditional institutional structure, because if you're only looking at grades and ability to take tests on computers to get into a university, you're excluding people who don't have the cultural background to know how to be successful with those, even though those students may have exceptional abilities to become a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when like people are critiquing universities now, there are a lot of different aspects of universities that you can choose one aspect of. Right? And so you can say that the standards are being lowered because we're no longer only taking people who get some certain score on some test. Or you could say our standards are actually higher now because we're looking at the potential of the individuals with their own background and how much the university education can advance them to being successful in a career, or even just successful in life. Education doesn't have to be for a career, in my view. And so, I think a lot of the critiques depend a huge amount on the perspective of the person who's coming towards that. And as someone who really has paid attention to how much our cultural context shapes what we know and who we are, I really, really enjoy helping someone from a cultural context that's not predicted to succeed in university, giving them an opening to show what they can do and see them just thrive and find a whole new path in life that really builds on their strengths.
I love it. We're gonna have to have you come back and let's explore this, because it's a theme that's, again, it's a hot topic in certain circles, and those who pay attention to post-secondary education and the various criticisms that are being thrown at universities, and actually going into institutions of higher learning in general. There's criticism about doing that and the value of it, and that's a big discussion. I would love for you to come back and for us to explore that particular subject and within the confines of this idea of how do we make the world a better place. But we'll put that on the table. I can't talk right now. We'll table that one. And then we'll come back to that for another session. But in the beginning here, you've mentioned it in a little bit in what you just said. I think you touched on some of that, or at least what I drew out of what you just said. You touched a little bit on your perspective on what makes a life worth living. Can you elaborate on that? What is a good life? What does living well mean? What makes life worth living?
Right. I think at a very fundamental level, a life worth living, or a good life, is one where you have a sense of well-being and a sense of purpose, right? And so the circumstances can be really variable, and I think that having sort of the resilience and the ability to find joy in the circumstances that life has given someone is the basis of a good life. And so I've traveled a lot, and I've seen people living in circumstances that would be incredibly difficult for me, but they still have joy and purpose and are living a good life. And so in thinking about, I'm incredibly privileged to have the job that I have with financial security, all of my basic living needs are more than met. And there's still people with very similar positions who are unhappy with their life, right? And so I think that there's some basic needs that have to be met for a good life, like healthy food, clean water, shelter, and a sense of personal security and security for your family and community. And sort of once those are met, then it becomes a lot about how we respond to the circumstances around us, whether or not we can basically find joy, the challenges that we face. I think any good life has challenges, and it's really important how we deal with those, how we respond to them, whether we can accept them as a way to improve ourselves or whether we feel like they're crushing us, right? And so there are a lot of components that go into that. And one of the things that's really important for me is physical activity. It always increases my sense of well-being. To be physically active, it changes my biochemistry in a way that's very productive. It doesn't mean that someone who isn't paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair can't find a sense of well-being. I know people who really have. They have to find it in a different way. And I think, mental health is really important. There's negative thoughts aren't necessarily the opposite of positive thoughts. And you can have lots of both at the same time. And it's sort of like, how do you amplify the positive thoughts and use the negative thoughts to understand your life, but don't let them sort of take over and pull you into a place where you lose your sense of well-being. So, I think one of the really important things for a sense of well-being and living a good life is having connections with other people. And I like a diversity of connections, like some really close friends, some casual acquaintances. One of the things that I learned from COVID was that I still maintain connections with my very close friends, but I didn't say hi to miscellaneous people at the coffee shop, right? And those just casual interactions with people I don't know that are sometimes it's surprising in a good way or a bad way, just what we say to each other. Those are really important to me. Just they sort of tie me to community. And getting back to capoeira, one of the things I really like about capoeira is that I end up with relationships and exchanges with people I would never know otherwise, right?
Oh, no, right?
Right, especially as an elderly white woman, it's like there are like a lot of places and people that I would just never see at the university that I have the joy of experiencing through capoeira. And that just enriches my life hugely.
Thank you for all of that. I love it. You touched on so many different pieces of the puzzle, and let's unpack some of that. I love how you we stress this a lot. A lot of people who come to this podcast and share their stories is, in life there's suffering, there's challenges. Life is hard, and it's how you respond to it. And I love what you said about the, being able to hold the positive and negative thoughts, and you can include negative and positive emotions in there as well. These psychological patterns of thought, movement in the mind, body. You can hold that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really don't think that you can maintain happy thoughts and a sense of joy if you don't have something to contrast it to. Right? I think that it's really essential to feeling joy to actually feeling sorrow and pain, right? Because we adjust to the scale of our experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you that's right. I love how you're saying, how do you use your negative experiences in the mind, or even in life in general, or how do you use that to help make your life better in some way, to learn from it, to grow? We don't have to push it away. We don't have to pretend that it doesn't exist. Right. And you're right. We talk about happiness and joy in contrast to something else. Yeah. And we don't have to pretend that it doesn't exist. We can learn from it, because challenge, like we know in capoeira, you constantly faced with challenge, You're constantly faced with challenge. Just preparing for the ritual of the game of capoeira, in the game of capoeira, you're constantly faced with challenge. How do you face that challenge? How do you use those challenging moments and those negative emotions or thoughts that pop into your mind? How do you learn from it? Learn something about yourself and how you are able to deal with certain situations in life. That's a beautiful thing, and that requires there's some skills.
Yeah.
That's a skill set in order to do that. Can you say a little bit about that? What are those skill sets? What do you need to be able to do this transmutation of negative thoughts into something positive?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I think I've had a couple of experiences that has taken me years to absorb and try to understand and how to use them for the better. I think it's some of the skills are to be able to step away from some of the emotions, and it can take a long time to do it, but say, okay, this is how this person's behavior made me feel. This was my response. And there's this question, like, how much can I change my response in the future? Like, if I get really angry, it hurts me a lot. Like, I don't tend to express my anger to other people, and so it doesn't affect the person that I'm angry with at all, but it's hurting me. Right? And so some of the skills are to say, okay, why did it make me angry? Why is it hurting me? How much of that can I forgive? Not for the benefit of the person I'm forgiving, but for the benefit of my own ability to overcome the harm that I experienced, right? So I think forgiveness is super important in the context of healing oneself, and that includes forgiving oneself as well. Like, there's certainly things that I regret, or that that I did, or I wish I had done, and just knowing that I can't change the past gives me an opportunity to think, okay, what can I do better next time to protect myself, or avoid the situation, or help the other person behave differently. And that's more important if I think they're harming other people as well. It's sort of like this stepping away from the immediate emotional response and saying, okay, my goal is to live the good life, right? What can I leave behind, and what parts of it do I bring forward to help myself, to help other people, build a better community.
Beautiful. Oh, you say a lot there as well. There's several things I want to draw out here. And what you're doing, I think, in the process that I want to draw. Since you are a scientist, I can't help but to bring that out.
Yeah.
This idea of having awareness, that's a major skill set there. It's to be able to look at your experience, to observe and witness your experience. That's a requirement, and that right there is difficult for a lot of us. Just to be able to do that, just to get started. And I think that's the gift of mindfulness-based practices, various contemplative practices. It's centered around initially learning how to observe your experience, to be a witness to your experience. And in order to do that, you got to give a little distance, like you said. Take a little distance away from, a little space away from the immediacy of your emotional experience. Right. And that requires a certain level of stillness, being still. That requires a certain level of openness, right, to do that. And that requires practice. And we're like, as Dawn said earlier, and you probably hear me say this a lot on this podcast, I'm not saying this is easy. And it requires exercise. It's like a muscle. You have to exercise your capacity of self-awareness, because it's so easy to get lost in emotions and narratives and be completely captured by those.
Yeah.
And sometimes most of us, we don't even know that that's what's happening, because we lack that capacity of observation.
Right. I actually experienced that just when I went to Brazil like 3 weeks ago. I brought so much stress with me from the accumulation of things that have been going on with politics in the university and my own group. I had brought it with me and I wasn't aware of it, and I was unable to release that stress and to recognize it until I started like working with my hands, making a berimbau, which is one of the capoeira instruments, right? Just sort of like doing repetitive motions with wood, thinking, and then it was helped my brain relax and recognize that the state that I was in didn't allow me to reflect on what I was doing, that I was carrying too heavy a load without recognizing it, without leaving anything behind. And that transition was just incredible, to recognizing that I didn't need to carry that stress, that it wasn't productive. There was nothing I could do about all the things I was worried about. I really needed to step back and say, okay, what is useful for me to think about? What is useful for me to move forward? And what are just things that I'm not going to influence? I can't influence.
Exactly. Oh, so beautiful. I love that example.
Yeah, that was the most important part of my trip to Brazil. No.
That's awesome. Good for you. So audience, I hope you learn from that, because that's important. Sometimes we got to step out of the waters that we're swimming in.
Yes.
We have to kind of get out of it in order to see, because it's very difficult to see. And for those of us who engage in contemplative practice, meditative practice, it can take years and years to really get that skill set down. And you continue to practice. You continue to cultivate that skill set and nurture it. Because we can easily get captured by the mind and its narrative and our various emotional responses to the troubling aspects of the world that we are experiencing now.
Right, and I think sometimes when we don't recognize we even need to do the contemplative practice, knowing what step you can take to get to that point, like how do you enter into that, and like for me, like working with my hands with something natural is the first step for me to sort of like enter into that next part for the healing.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things of those who are not aware of like meditative practices and things of that nature, a lot of times various schools of thought is you start with concentration practice, where you're focused on an object of your concentration, and you just keep focused on it, you keep coming back to that. And that's very similar to working on a craft. An artist just working on something, just keep coming back to that thing that they're working on. And in that space, everything else disappears for a moment.
Yeah.
And then, especially when you're doing crafts, and you start thinking. You're still focused on the thing, and you start thinking, and during that period of thinking, you can start to ask yourself questions. And this is what I wanted to say. And I think this is what you're doing. This is what I advocate. And I think this is a misunderstanding by a lot of people of what science is. I think what you're doing is applying scientific mindset. And why the scientific mindset is so important. Science does not have to be reduced to the material world, at least the scientific mindset. I think those in the contemplative traditions, that's what they're doing. You are making an observation. That's the very first step of science. It's not making a hypothesis, making a guess about something. I mean, that's one thing to do in the scientific method. But that's just not how normal everyday science works.
Right.
It starts before the Enlightenment version, the Western Enlightenment version of the scientific method, and what comes out of it. Even way back in the day, science was, let's make an observation. And now people may have, made claims that didn't make a lot of sense, like we're doing today, that somebody 100, 200, 300 years from now going to be like, that didn't make any sense.
Right.
But it starts with making observations, and then the scientific mindset that really indulges in this process of asking questions. What is happening? What am I seeing?
Right.
What is leading to what it is that I'm seeing?
Right.
Where did this come from? What is the process? How is this happening?
Right. How is it conflicting with what I thought before,
Exactly.
like when I started the process? Because if it's all exactly as you predict, you haven't learned anything.
Nope.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it. You can apply these scientific skills to your normal everyday experiences, particularly when you're trying to deal with negative emotions, things that are causing harm to yourself and ultimately to others as a result.
Right.
And if we engage in scientific thinking and not just reduce science to data collection in a lab, you're collecting data. Once you start observing your mind, once you start observing your inner experience, you're collecting data.
Yeah.
And when you're collecting data, you start to analyze that data, and you start to ask questions about the data that you're collecting. If that's not science, I don't know what it is.
To me, the scientific process is that cycle of making observations, analyzing, asking questions, revising your assumptions, revising your questions, and it's sort of this cycle of increasing understanding about a process or a system or yourself. And so it's you can't make a hypothesis without observations, because then it's just like miscellaneous, unrelated to anything, right? So the formalization of a hypothesis is really this. It's just really like trying to force the structure onto science.
Bingo.
Right. Which I think people are intrinsically scientists, and sometimes that enforced structure makes people think that they aren't and makes them afraid of science. But you look at a 2-year-old, they're exploring their world, they're testing things, they're learning, they're creating models for how it works in their brains, and we can keep doing that our entire lives. Exactly.
And we can just refine. It's a skill set. Scientific thinking is a skill set, and doesn't have to be reduced to, again, the exploration of the material world. And that's great. It's good to do all of that. But what can happen is that people, I won't go there, but people they put constraints prior to making the observations, and it just affects the what's downstream of that. And the technologies that we would create and everything. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we're really open, like you're saying, like a 2-year-old, if we're really, really open to exploring what is happening in our experience, once we collect that data, and then we make adjustments in our actions based on our observations, the questions that we ask about our experience, and then we make adjustments, and that's an experiment.
Right.
I think every moment of our life is an experiment, whether we want it to or not. Yeah. It's an experiment. And then we collect more data, like, well, I made that adjustment. Probably don't need to do that. Or I'm like, okay, this seems like I'm going in the right direction. I feel a little bit better now. Let me see if I continue going down this path, and now that I have a direction to go in this, and I guess the hypothesis or the proposal is like, well, if I keep going down this direction, will this make my life better? And then you keep going, you run the experiment, collect the data, and like, well, no, actually, I need to make another turn in this direction. That's life, that's science, but that's how we, I think, make our lives better, is going through, consistently going through that process, that inner process.
Right, and I think one of the really important things about that process is the change in response to the observations.
Yes.
Right? Is that the scientific process, like with the science I do for my work, I'm always wrong in detail. Right? There's always is never right. because I don't know enough. And you have to be on that boundary of knowledge, and to be learning new things, right? And you only learn new things if you're wrong, if your assumptions are wrong, or some concept is incompletely developed, right? And I think if we approach ourselves and our lives that way, we're open to new experiences. We're open to finding joy in things. We experience the pain. It can be really painful to be wrong. Like, it opens you up to that pain, but then having the skills to use that pain to build a better life, a better model, find the better path is what to me is a good life, right? Is that continual adjusting, experimenting, improvising, saying, oh, that didn't work, okay, this one did. That brings a lot of joy.
Beautiful. Oh, I love it. I'm so happy this has come out in this conversation, because it's really important to me. I have a PhD in chemical engineering, and people are like, oh, you didn't do it, you're not using it, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, I do use it.
Oh, yeah, you're using it.
Big time, like in what I do, and the work that I do in the world. Why I'm so intense about trying to make sense of my experience, because of what you just said. I know I'm wrong. I know that my assumptions are not 100% correct. And that's the scientist. That's the scientific mindset. I was about to say that's the true scientist. But you know what I mean when I say that. A true scientist is not so fundamentalistic. And a lot of supposedly science, particularly materialistic sciences, are very fundamentalist and dogmatic. And they're not looking at their assumptions. And it can take generations before that shift, because people are refusing to practice the kind of science that we're talking about. And we can apply that in our lives. And I'm glad you brought up the idea of models, because we are always creating models. We may not be aware of the models that we're creating, or the models that we're operating by, the models that we've inherited from our society, our family, from based on our experiences. We operate in the world based on some type of programming. And we can shift and change those models, those metaphors, those programs, through the scientific process, through a scientific way of thinking. And that is the same or similar to a contemplative way of thinking. It's essentially what you're doing. You're approaching your life as a scientist, as a witness to your experience, and a sense maker, trying to make sense of your experience, and really genuinely interested in adapting your models, modifying your models to your ultimate goal, your ultimate aim, which is to not to just acquire information, but to make your life better. Not to just like get caught in the drama of, oh, I'm going to observe my mind and just constantly watch all of my dramas and get caught up in it. We're not saying that. You actually, how do you transform your experience, transform your models, so that you can transform your future experiences? And I think that's an ongoing process. To me, that is the good life. That process in and of itself, this consistently engaging in this process of discovery and remodeling and reforming ourselves.
Right. I really like that idea of the good life being a process and a path, and not a destination or an end point, right? Because once you get somewhere, what are you going to do?
Right? I know, right?
Right? It's like, to me, it's very much the process. It's the path, taking the path, exploring the new things, that is the good life. It is the process of living is super important, and not achieving a specific goal necessarily.
And we're looking for increasing, enhancing well-being and goodness in our lives, and recognizing that There is no end to that, really.
Yeah.
Until the day we leave this earth, there's really no end to that. If we're living in the world, because as we're living in the world, there are always going to be challenges that we need to overcome.
Right. And I think, like we talked about before, if we don't have those challenges, we don't actually experience the joy and the positives, right? Because it's the contrast between the two that we experience, that our minds register. We get accustomed to a baseline.
Yep.
And if it's too static, it just becomes dull.
Yep. Oh, beautiful. And you said something earlier I want to tie into this that's important. So folks, you can think about why this can potentially take a long time for certain things. Sometimes, even in the laboratory, when you collect data, when you're looking at your experience, and you're dissatisfied with what's going on in your life, I'm unhappy about something, I'm angry about something, and it's affecting me in ways that are causing harm to me mentally and physically, spiritually as well. And I recognize that, and I want to do something about it. But as we start collecting data and we start observing our experiences, there are things that we don't want to see sometimes. And we're trying to force the data to represent our preconceived notions. That happens in physical science a lot, folks. But people don't want to admit it. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
But we know this in our own inner experience. Those of us who engage in this process of observing our inner experience and doing that inner work, you can quickly start to realize that, wow, I don't want to see certain things. So that's one aspect of it. So we can be in denial for years. And we're not seeing clearly for years, and it can be not as a result of us intentionally trying to do that. It can be that way because of our programming that we lack awareness of. Right. But the beautiful thing is that if we keep at it, we'll discover what that programming is, and we're like, oh, the lens that I have on of looking at this data is a little fuzzy. I'm not seeing the data clearly. Right. But you only realize that through consistently making that observation. And in the process of doing that, you're still making, quote unquote, making mistakes or causing harm to yourself in the process. Even though that's not your intention is to try to overcome it. Right. But the way that you're filtering the data, the way that you're seeing the data, the information that you're taking in about your experience is quote unquote tainted. It's not clear. Right. And so that contributes to things taking a long time.
Right. And I think sometimes that lack of clarity or the hidden aspects of some of it is protective. Right?
Yeah,
because there's some things that are so difficult and traumatic that it's impossible to look at them clearly all at once. Right, and I think that there's been a lot of studies about dealing with PTSD and some of these things now. Is that there are techniques to sort of rewrite our response to traumatic experiences, and it is sort of through this a little bit of exposure, like retelling the story through time, that allows people to overcome things that are in other cases truly devastating, right? And so it's not like having something hidden and not looking at it isn't necessarily bad. Yeah. But it's something that it should be addressed over time, but that the length of time in that path will vary depending on the person's resources, the help they get, the guidance that they can get, and how to develop the skills to be able to address it.
Bingo. So I love it. I love how you just said that. And that's the process. And even for that just happens over and over and over again. Even with if it's certain, especially if it's a major event it's called severe PTSD, that's super traumatic. You can keep just chiseling that thing away, unraveling that onion. Just keep chiseling away over and over and over again, and little things become more revealed. Things become clearer and clearer with continual, I'm going to use the word practice and investigation. and exploration,
Yeah.
and then making adaptations. And then eventually you get to a point where you start to really see the big picture.
Right.
And once you see the big picture, and once you have a better sense of what's going on, it can still take more time to make the adaptations and to make a big shift and create a new model. Now you're like, okay, now I see what's going on. I had to create a better model. And then you have to habituate yourself to the new model, the new way of programming, the new programming that you create for yourself. So, and there's more to it. I don't want to keep going into too much detail about this process, but then you can see how this can take a long time. And this is where patience, I think you've been hinting at, is important. We have to be patient with the process.
Yeah.
Life can be difficult and it is full of challenges. It is uncomfortable, a lot of it. Even when you're doing something very joyful, it can be quite uncomfortable sometimes. But that's the process. Being patient with the process and knowing that, the good life, a life worth living, is not necessarily going to be all pleasant. I don't know if that's even possible. But
I don't think it can be.
I don't. But someone might be listening to this like, no, my life is great every day, all day. I'm like, okay, good for you. But for most of us, I don't think it's not possible for most human beings that live.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like this process, like you mentioned before, there's skills to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right, and I think a lot of our societies and cultures don't teach us those skills, and so that's one of the things that, getting back to my role as a professor and trying to help open the doors to education, in particular science, to people from different backgrounds, is to sort of like help people think about the skills and how do you develop them, and how, your perspective of being excluded can be turned around in different ways, to sort of reframe the challenges and the questions. That those are skills that I really think would be beneficial for us to be teaching our children.
Oh, don't get me going on that one. Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's just some of these life skills, the moral skills, the value of community, because sometimes the best way to overcome things is to work with other people and have those relationships with other people, to help challenge your perspective and to give new ideas on the paths forward.
Yes. And but that right there, you're saying that challenging our perspectives. We live in a society where people don't want to do that. We don't want to challenge our perspectives on things. But that's important. That is an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And when you're living in a world amongst other human beings, and you're trying to make the best out of it, they're trying to make the best out of it, we need to challenge the way that we're seeing things. We need to be open, because we need to agree on how to live together.
Yeah.
Again, and that requires us to take a closer look. Again, apply science, take a scientific mindset and apply it to our perspective. How am I seeing things, and how is that influencing my relationships with the world, and that ultimately influences the quality of my life experience. And that requires, again, doing the hard work of observing and running experiments, collecting data, all of the things we just mentioned. And you said something I think is a skill set too earlier.
It is, yeah.
Is another one too that you mentioned is forgiveness. Forgiveness is a tool. And it's for what you just mentioned. And I really want to make sure we highlight this before this is over, this conversation is done. Because you slipped it in, but it's so important. It is a part of the skill set to releasing negative emotions, or releasing an excessive amount of stress and strain on ourselves. And also can help facilitate better relationships with the world.
Yeah.
Even though you might not ever want to associate with a person who's caused harm to you ever again. And that's fine. That's good. But forgiveness is so important to your own personal well-being. Mm-hmm. And it's also going to influence how you interact with the world in the future. So can you say a little bit more about it, about forgiveness? I think you said it really clearly, Bill. I would love to just highlight it a little bit more for folks to really take this in.
Yeah, I guess to me, the forgiveness is a very personal, and it's a personal decision that I make usually for my own benefit, right? And so there are actions that people have done that I completely disagree with and don't condone at all. And so the act of forgiveness for the harm is much more not saying that it's okay, but saying that I accept that this happened, and I'm going to go forward with that acceptance that it happened, and release as much of the harm that's done to me as possible. Like I can't forgive the harm that say someone did to you, because that's up to you to decide. Mm-hmm. But when they harm you, it can also harm me, and I can forgive that component that harmed me. Mm-hmm. And say, I'm going to accept that this happened, I'm going to move forward, I'm going to do what I can to prevent it in the future, or maybe I'll do what I can to help you recover from that harm, that sort of process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I think we can't stress that enough, that what we're doing, we're cutting the cord, in a sense, that the cord that has me bound to someone who's caused harm to me. Mm-hmm. If I'm cutting the cord with forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And it's, once I do that, I'm free to see a little more clearly. Yeah. I have more energy now. And all the things that you just said, that's just one metaphorical way of looking at it. It's cutting that unnecessary cord, that bond that I have with that individual that has caused harm in my life. And I'm glad you brought up that, I can't forgive someone for you. It's something that you have to do.
Right.
But there's value in it. And you don't have to like the person. No. I think people are confused about that with forgiveness. You don't have to like the person. You don't ever have to hang out with them ever again. You don't ever have to look at them. But when you do that, it's going to influence and shape your relationships moving forward. Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes it's like, I have an experience with a family member who I found that the forgiveness was really important for my relationship with them. And in that particular case, the forgiveness was forgiving them for having some characteristics that I was having a hard time accepting, right? And so the forgiveness was basically saying, I understand that this is who you are, and I love you anyway, even though it's hard for me to deal with, right? And so it's a little bit forgiveness, but it's a little bit acceptance as well. Yes. Right? And so it's the part that I think is the forgiveness is the part that not just accepting who they are, but saying, okay, these actions because of who you are that I find irritating, I forgive you those because I know that there are things you're dealing with and struggling with now. And so that's sort of the opposite side of forgiving someone who's done harm and you never want to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
There's also
Yeah.
the forgiveness of someone who's very close to you, who's you're feeling harm from them because of the struggle they're facing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like, okay, there's this key aspect of forgiveness that lets me accept you for who you are and appreciate you, even though it's challenging.
Yep. Oh, yep. And we can have a healthy distance, even in with family members, in a certain kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a certain amount of like, you know, I see you, I can be in the same room with you,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have to, we can have an affable relationship, but we don't have to go much further than
Right.
that. And because of that acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And when we accept the world as it is, it makes life a lot easier.
Right.
You know?
It doesn't. Acceptance doesn't mean that we don't want to change it. Then,
No,
either.
no.
Right,
Oh, no.
right.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
this. Okay, the world is this way, but maybe I can make it better.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like with our lives, you know, I can accept, okay, this is where I am in my life. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to just go and try to make it better. I'm like, no, I
Right.
want to continue to make it better.
Right.
But if I don't accept it as it is, I won't see clearly what is actually happening in my
Right.
experience. When we don't accept people for who they are, we're not going to see clearly who they really truly are, and then we'll be stuck in this negative loop that we find ourselves in. No, I mean that again, all these skills. These are skill sets that takes practice. Things like acceptance, forgiveness, and how they all intertwine with awareness and sensitivity. And you threw in empathy and particularly cognitive empathy, you know, trying to understand, like, I don't know exactly what your story and narrative is, but I can imagine what that story and narrative is. I'll try to pull out of you what that story and narrative is. I may not agree with you, but I can at least say, oh, okay, I can see the world through your lens. That's having empathy. And then, you know, having compassion. You threw that in there. Having compassion for someone else, having compassion for yourself. All of these different things are teachable. You can learn these skills, and that's going to help make your life better.
Right. And one of the things I think is really important to emphasize is that skills take time to develop. And the people listening, you're talking to someone who's 50 and almost 60, right? And we spend a lot of time thinking about these things and working on these skills, right? And so the expectations of being able to apply them need to be appropriate to the length of time that someone's been working on developing them, right? And so the expectations of being able to forgive or to contemplate, to observe yourself from a little distance, it takes time and work.
Yeah.
And taking those first steps towards those skills, or the middle steps towards developing them better, is part of that process. And so that, you know, it's like learning capoeira. You can't play an advanced game at the beginning.
No.
It's the life skills too. You learn step by step. You learn by making mistakes. You go, oh, actually that worked well. This really didn't. So let's see. Let's refine what I can do, and each person has different ways to do it and different abilities depending on who they are.
Beautiful. I used to think, you know, when I really got into, I've been on this journey a long time, but when I first really started to really focus my attention on these various contemplative practices and just really focused on, like, I want to change my life to be better. I thought I can do it in like a few years. You know, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make everything is gonna be great. I'm gonna, like, for hours a day living that intense meditation, breathing exercises, physical exercises, a very comprehensive yoga practice that I still do today, but I'm not under the illusion that it's all my problems are going to disappear in a few months or a few years. And it just takes time, and that's why I like to talk with people on this podcast who have a little life experience because of what you just said. And in those who are listening to this, in this audience, there are some, you know, from what I hear and see as lots of 30-year-olds listening to this, and like be patient with the process. Patience is all a part of it. And you said something about these skills that we don't teach in our culture. But we don't. It's essentially comes out of a liberal arts education in terms of education programs or systems, ways of thinking about education institutionally, is thinking about big questions, asking yourself big questions. Who are we as human beings? Why do we do the things that we do? And where do we go here? How do we do those things? Can we change the way that we're seeing the world? What is the narrative? What is the story that we're living by? What are our myths, our metaphors, the allegories that we take as reality? And how do we play within all of that? Those questions we ask of ourselves, and we check in with the immediacy of our experience, and make adaptations based on that. Well, we have to even ask the question, what is a good life? That's why I'm doing this podcast.
Right.
I spent my life trying to basically teach these skills to folks, and about how to approach their experience and try to make it better. And I'm grateful that you, as a scientist who deals in was it
geobiology, Earth life
what am I saying?
Yeah.
I know. Biology was just stuck in my head. I couldn't even bring another part of it out. But yeah, geobiology, and you can still have this type of conversation because I think you have a scientific mindset, and you're applying that scientific mindset not only to your work in geobiology, but also your own inner experience. And before, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I really try to be a scientist as a human being,
exactly.
Right? In society with connections, right? It's not separate to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to come into with this idea of in society and connections with community. I know we're coming to a close here, but I want to at least ask you a little bit about that. You've said it, but I want for you to say a little bit more about relating to others in community and the value of that in terms of a good life.
Yeah, so this connects to my science as well, and the sort of the idea of ecology is that a lot of times life is framed as survival of the fittest and competition, but we cannot exist without each other, without other human beings, without other organisms. We're really part of a complex, intertwined, interdependent ecosystem on a planet. And so our society, our well-being has evolved within this ecosystem. And I think thinking of ourselves as part of this larger ecosystem, I keep using the same word, but it's sort of like the larger context of being on a planet with life, is who we are. And living life in that way is living the good life, being part of Earth is. And acknowledging that we are all interdependent, and we are interdependent on the bacteria that became chloroplasts in plants to make oxygen. We're dependent on the bacteria on our skin to keep it from drying out, and the little mites that live in our pores. And we're not humans in terms of just our human cells. We're humans in terms of all of the organisms that we need to live.
Oh, you're speaking my language here. I love it. That's a whole big discussion in and of itself. I love that you're saying that, because we're not isolated beings. I just think it's silly, this idea of survival of the fittest. Again, that's and just purely competition, reducing life to that. Survival of the fittest in terms of a purely competitive world that we live in.
Right. You could think of survival of the fittest in terms of the fittest organisms are those with the most strongest mutualistic relationships.
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like one organism cannot live on its own.
No.
Right? And so it's not the fittest to be to outcompete everything.
Exactly. That's not it. I love it. There is this interdependency, and how do we show up in that? And I think when we engage in a little bit more cooperation, we can play with I always talk about competition within the umbrella of cooperation. And then you get this whole collaborative experience. And when we're engaged in collaboration, we can make the world a beautiful place.
Right. Right. Competition doesn't necessarily have a single winner.
No.
Right? It's actually the competition is one of those things that helps you find space to grow. And it can be beneficial to the people competing as well as observers and casual sort of participants, and capoeira is a beautiful component of that, right? The music is responsive to the play is responsive to the music. It depends on past training, it depends on past interactions, and like how the sun is shining, and
right,
right, and so that sort of competition can bring everyone up, but it's the idea that the most fit survives and everyone else dies is just not how life works.
No, it's so no.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's just like looking at the cheetah chasing the impala, forgetting that the impala is eating the grass and fertilizing it, and the cheetahs are competing among each other and cooperatively, and it's just
Oh, you see these things where you see the lion who's just eaten. It just had their belly is full. They're not going out and just killing other creatures. They can be right by another creature that they would normally eat.
Yep.
But they're just hanging out like, no, I'm good.
Right.
I don't need to eat anything else. And we as human beings, we should be mindful of these metaphors that we use when we talk about other animals to justify our barbarism in many cases. And being open to rethinking about how we think about evolution. And I think, evolution, or biological evolution, is essentially adaptation. That fit is that which is adapting to the current circumstances.
Right. But the thing is that there are tons and tons of organisms that aren't the fittest, that are still alive, and they're still active, and they're still contributing to the ecology, right? and we don't understand how critical they are, and maybe they're not critical, but they're still persisting, and that adds to the diversity and the resilience of the ecosystem.
Exactly.
So all sorts of things survive that aren't the fittest.
Exactly.
In any measure, yeah.
I know, right? It's adaptation, and that's where I don't want to go too much into this, but that's where we were talking about earlier how not just scientists, but I'm going to use this analogy in science. Scientists can be so fixated on an idea and not looking at what's right in front of their faces. Yeah. And we do that. We're so fixed. Look at our political atmosphere. We're definitely not going into that right now. The culture, definitely not. The culture war stuff. And we just look at human behavior, how we treat each other. We get so fixated on these ideas, and we can't see what's right in front of our faces.
Right.
And we're willing to do things that defies logic in terms of what it is that we're seeing. I'm amazed at this, Dawn. I'm pretty super nerdy, and I like reading books, but these days I listen to a lot of professors and intellectuals talk about these things. I'm just amazed that the blinders that people have on who've been practicing scientists, even some philosophers, where I'm just like, wow, you're supposedly trained to think beyond this, but so fixated on their assumptions that that refuse to see the thing that's glaringly right in front of our faces.
Right. I think that you mentioned they're trained scientists, right? I think some of the problems with education in the university system is that there's certain patterns of training that are restrictive, like making assumptions about certain things, or the need to categorize things and not see things as a continuum or in the full complexity of issues. There's this training towards Occam's razor, which is like the simplest explanation is the best, where that has its place, but when you're dealing with issues that are influenced by hundreds of different things, you might look at the two most important ones, but maybe they explain 5% of what's going on.
Exactly.
Right? And they might explain the most out of all those hundreds, but it's not a complete explanation, right? And when you focus on the reduction to the most important thing, you may be missing the whole dynamics of what's going on.
Yeah. I won't get into this, but scientists only have a misunderstanding of the whole Occam's razor thing, where it comes from, the context in which he came up with that notion, but that's another discussion. But I think some of you may be asking, what does this have to do with living well? But that's it. It's being able to see the complexity of the world that we live in and being mindful of the assumptions that we're making, our dogmas, our various fundamental notions about how things are. Yes, you got to come into something with some type of assumption.
Right. But you have to have a model for how Earth works, but you have to keep revising it.
You have to keep revising. I have a model of how the world works. I have a model of how to interact with other human beings. I grew up Southern Baptist, for instance, in the deep south of South Carolina, in a small farm town. So that shaped the way that I saw things. I had my assumptions about the world, but I kept revising my assumptions and challenging my assumptions through running the experiments of living a life. And being open and receptive to modifying and changing the assumptions based on the data that I'm actually seeing versus forcing the data to fit my assumptions. Yeah. And I think if we can think about life that way, I really do think we can make the world a more beautiful place. It doesn't mean that it won't be filled with more challenges, but we work together in community. We cooperate to make the world a better place, to make the world such that humans can thrive, not just humans, but all the well-being of all life.
Because we depend on all of that life.
Exactly.
Right? And we need the challenges to experience the benefits, right? It's
exactly.
So interconnected.
And modifying our assumptions about how we live as human beings based on the data that is being collected. What is the environmental things that we are seeing and we're challenged by in the world reflects the quality of our own life. When I look at the Earth, I look at these things. The planet going to be around. I think it's symbolic representation of what's happening with humans, with our behavior, because we're causing a lot of this stuff to happen. It is affecting us, but we refuse to look at it. We refuse to modify and change our assumptions, and it's causing unnecessary suffering in the world and diminishing well-being for ourselves, as well as billions of other human beings who are suffering as a consequence of our actions. And when we're taking into consideration what you're saying, and you say you're repeating the word ecology, I think we should be saying that growing up in kindergarten, start talking about ecology. And talking about how we're interdependent, and talking about the complexity of the world and how we fit within it. Right. And it's an important word. Yes, the same word in ecology and exploring our, that's another way I want to use that word, but I can't think of it now, but exploring
our interdependences.
And our ecological footprint based on our actions, and really being sensitive to that. Well, Dawn, I've loved this. I've loved this conversation. It went in a direction I didn't expect.
Our conversations always do, Broderick.
I love it. I loved it. This was great.
It was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun, and Yeah, I was like, the morning podcast interviews are a little hard for me sometimes because audience, this is where I'm not living well at. Is I don't my sleeping cycles are just a challenge. I don't get enough sleep
Uh-huh.
sometimes, and last night was one of those nights,
Yep.
and I wake up the beginning of this conversation. I'm like, man, the neurons not popping right. They're not. I'm just the thoughts are not clear. But as the conversation went along, I feel a little
Mm-hmm.
bit better now. At least
Good.
I feel really good.
Good.
I love when I can have a conversation with someone and feel really good afterwards and feel like I've learned something, even when I feel like I can't speak clearly. But I've learned so much from the way that you place words. Excuse me. The way that you're talking about this, and again, audience, this is why it's important to have conversations with people, different times, different days, but also just having conversations, because the way something can land in one moment can shift the trajectory of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I keep having these conversations on the podcast. I'm inspired by this conversation to keep going with this, um, because sometimes I'll be honest, it's hard to keep this going when
Yeah. It's a
I'm
lot
not
of
making
work.
money. It's a lot of work. I'm not making money from it, and I've had to like pause a week or so more than I wanted to because I have work and all of the capoeira activities. I have so many things that I'm doing, and as rewarding as this is, it can be a challenge. So, listeners, I encourage you to share this with your friends if you're enjoying this podcast. Write a review, start a Substack. Please go to my Substack, broderick.substack.com. Getting that going, move the podcast over there. And again, that's why I was late last week and getting that solo episode up. That's one reason why. But yeah, support the podcast and support me doing this work, and so I can have more conversations with people such as Dawn, so we can all learn together. And there's lots of other things I want to do, like have Dawn come back and let's have that conversation about ecology and really break down our responsibility in that. So it's been lovely, sister, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
I always enjoy talking, and I've learned so much from you in this conversation and others, and with so many other people. It really, the value of those relationships comes from the exchange of ideas and learning from each other. Really appreciate it.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. Until next time.
All right.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.